Okay. Film Clowns of the Depression, mid-March. We keep talking because we are trying to peel the skin off of our little world. It's not that we're chewing the fat, we're force-feeding this thing so it becomes blurry and undefined, like a goose getting ready to become foie gras. When you said that there is a kind of violence in this intimacy, I agreed with you. You can see it in the scatter of broken toothpicks on the table in front of us and the ocean of hair I've been nervously tearing out of my head for weeks. I tell you everything. I mean it as a gift, but we both end up with our lungs full of water. Somehow this makes me feel triumphant and like a desert toad. Blood is coming out of my eyes. Blood is coming out of mine. Wherever. And then we're back at 56 Leonard, high up in one of the penthouses. It was under construction, same as now, although the form was different. It had this kind of a semicircle, like an airport hotel. All of the rooms were joined together by these Jack and Jill type bathrooms. Every time you went to use them, you had to choose one side or the other and never knew what or who you were going to find. Evidently, you said this was a problem and owned the hotel, so it was your job to find a solution. The next morning, my jaw hurt from bruxism, no doubt. Last spring, the first thing that happened was that you performed telepathy at a very great distance. This spring, we had lunch and you actually seemed to smell like roses. When I asked, you confirmed, "It's Lalabo's rose, do you know it?" Then you said this thing I was thinking, how a lot of people seem to be wearing Lalabo right now, at least in our little world. Later I saw a pack of rose-flavored gum on your desk and wondered if it was peculiar for the pleasure of smell to extend to the pleasure of taste. On the subject of roses, you told me that your parents have a rose farm. It's actually in the process of being reconfigured into an orchid farm because there's no money in roses anymore. Though it would seem they would have gotten a boost after Jay-Z gave Beyoncé 10,000 of them to congratulate her on a spectacular halftime performance. I wondered what happened after. I pictured an empty swimming pool like the one in Porter Ranch. Then I pictured it again, only this time filled with potpourri. For the next month, it seemed I could pick up any phone and you would be on the other end. I decided you were Beatrice and you would lead the descent. 1st November. We met in the basement of Bloomingdale's. You were holding a piece of iron-colored cardstock to your face and inhaling it. The salesman said it was one of the original Eau de Hermes, conceived by Edmund Renitska, who felt that if a perfume was well made, it had a clear and distinct form that would help to articulate the world within. Your pupils were glossy black and heavy with want. The salesman informed us regretfully that Hermes had discontinued the fragrance. This bottle was the last. Your desperation blossomed in that moment, but it was clear his hands were tied. At Anik Goutal, you wanted me to smell the scent you had bought a couple of weeks before. There was a whole story. Late February. You said that you hate the way every car in a film set in 1950 will be a two-tone 1950 Chevrolet Bel Air. It's good because your Scion was one of the original ones that were still sharp and boxy before filling out a couple of years later. I remember well the year 2004. I had just come back to the States after a couple years living abroad and felt there had been some major cultural shift evident in the boxy look of the Scion XP. You asked me what I did. I told you about the straw factory that had just collapsed or maybe exploded. It's not that I work at a straw factory. I was just trying to give you a sense of the terrain. You seem to understand because without missing a beat, you told me about when you used to collect brake rotors for scrap. We drove past a series of plexiglass monoliths that were described in the newspaper as alien porta potties. You said something about the next time I come into contact with someone that smells like you, I said something about my world and wondered something about your world, and then we were on the curb, embracing for a long moment before I went into the terminal. 2nd November. You had just moved back to the city and didn't have a roommate yet, and so offered that I could stay with you. It made sense because we needed to see each other's skin. Time snowballs at a certain point and starts moving faster and faster. You've been on gaps for several years and have become a different person. I've tried to follow your recipes, but I feel I'm only becoming your molted exoskeleton. I noticed immediately the bottle of Ami Boutal with its awkward gold bow. Clearly you regretted the whole thing. You wanted me to give it a try, but later you said I had to stop wearing it. Your contempt seemed to extend from the fragrance to my presence. I ended up spending most of my time at the reading library at Grand Army Plaza. Before I left, you told me that I should take the perfume. I got home and blanketed myself in a fog of it. There is a really touching scene in the documentary on Valentino when he turns to his partner Giancarlo Giametti, and asks him in the back of their town car if he's too orange. Giancarlo responds with complete tenderness and says that he is, in fact, just a little too orange. You expressed a similar sentiment, but later let it go, saying that it seemed to be fun for me, like Halloween. I took this fog with me to a lunch meeting with a couple in Gower Plaza. Perceptive and discerning as they both are, one of them immediately asked me if it was the same perfume that a mutual friend of ours wore. I realized that it was, exactly. Many things then became apparent all in succession, like a winding arrangement of dominoes clicking down the line until the landscape, which once contained only verticals, was now a collapsed straw factory. Monday, February 29th, 2016. I thought about you this morning on my way to work because I heard this thing on the radio about sommeliers. They were talking about how it's true that language actually helps people to experience complexities in wine. The language allows us to access different levels of taste, flavor, and nuance. This seems like a relevant point for us now. I wonder, what do teeth taste like? I suppose there's no outside there, no way of ever knowing. I've been thinking a lot about teeth, of course, and how this mouth, this orange grove, this shrub or bush or whatever, that began at the very start of the catch-all holiday season, also coincidentally citrus season, now feels in our post-lemonade world more like a bodega or some kind of storage. That place where you bump up against a cache of mints when you go to grab your stress-relieving herbal tea. It might seem like a coincidence, but of course these things are carefully coordinated, orchestrated, scripted. After lunch, you called to say that one of the preparateurs had found a number of rare coins in one of the crates. I explained that they're just wheat pennies, friends of Sweet Scoop. When we're all on gaps, wheat will seem horrible, only stuff for cats to shit in. You said that the imprint of wheat on one of these pennies appears to have a shadow. They call it a double die, and insanely it's worth $2,000. 12 years ago, April, a week ago today. This all reminded me of one holiday years ago when you brought me into your room because you wanted to show me this spread of cell phones you had been collecting. There were all different kinds, a Motorola Razr, some candy bar phones, early smartphones like the Palm Trio, a couple of smashed iPhones, and maybe an Android. As we were talking, one of them started buzzing and another was flashing its blue light. Was I understanding that your collection was really loot? But what will you do with them? I asked. As if in a vision, you said, I am going to use them to connect. From another time zone, you finally replied to my link. Bisonnet, pronounced Bisonnet, the chimpanzee, has escaped from the zoo and is swinging across electrical wires before being shot with a sedative arrow. The video touches me because Bisonnet looks like what I think I would look like if I were wearing a chimpanzee costume for Halloween, let's say. Your reply was a clip of a big cat waking up in the wild after sedation. She moves slowly, heavily through the grass as if it's a field of molasses. She stumbles and the video ends. In the next step, it's 10 years later, and you are back in my life wearing the most elegant Dries Van Noten suit I have ever seen. Speaking of textiles, we sit and weave several lifetimes' worth of dental floss. You've been working at Barney's and said you probably spent $10,000 on clothes in the last year alone. All end-of-season sales, of course. We talked about everything, your mother speaking in tongues, your sister opening up her forearms and smearing blood all over the walls. We talked about the Purita factory and the Angel Soft factory. We talked about gore. What did they actually produce? The floss seemed only to be a calling card. Now it's been weeks and I have no idea where you are. I picture you in the kitchen looking like an orange, though from this distance it's hard to tell. Maybe you're not an orange at all, just a heap of compost. It's a Sunday night, so I imagine you are boiling a pot of those long pasta straws. What are they called? I've been thinking about how Scandinavian languages have so many words for snow because there's so much of it, but it seems this particular tet might not have any language at all. Predictably, the Santa Anas start raging as the sun sets. I miss the alarm. Of course, more seasons pass. The end.